Well, this is, incredible music to my ears, what you're describing.
Well, I mean, you just said music, and that always makes me smile because, the handy gene is recessive, tragically. I didn't get it. We're sitting here today because my pop, my granddad, was a tradesman in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. He was an electrician by trade, but he'd do anything. He'd take your watch apart, put it back together blindfolded. He had that chip. He only went to the 7th grade, but the guy could build a house without a blueprint, And I was so sure I'd follow in his footsteps. But my passion didn't match up with my skills, And he was the guy who told me, I was 15 or 16. He was like, look, you can be a tradesman, just get a different toolbox. So that gets me in entertainment. That gets me into dirty jobs. And all these years later, the foundation is an homage to him because he was happy in his work and he would be invisible today. People would look straight through him, So a big part of what we do in the foundation are the work ethic scholarships. But the other part is to challenge people like me who are addicted to smooth roads and affordable electricity and indoor plumbing, right? The rest of us, the 300 million people in this country who are addicted to chewing and swallowing things, right? So when I can, I like to point out that 1.5% of our population are the farmers who are feeding 330 million of us 3 times a day and a big chunk of the world to boot. That's impressive. I like to point out that our skilled workforce is relatively small and we depend upon them entirely.
Well, and I might add, some of us, especially what you might call the laptop class during the pandemic, almost found that they forgot about those people. Because what I'm talking about, there was this, whatever it was, 15 days to slow the spread, just isolate
2 weeks
yourself.
To flatten the curve,
right?
I believe it was.
Right. And so, but what about the people that are bringing you the food? And what are the people that keep things running, that keep the waste disappearing?
No 2 weeks for them.
Well, no, exactly, right?
Right.
So, but it's almost like people forgot that those people even exist.
Can I tell you a story about that?
Sure.
I don't tell this a lot because it's embarrassing. I became very disconnected from the most fundamental things to which I was very connected as a kid, where my food came from, where my energy came from. I had a great appreciation for that. 20 years in Hollywood will round those edges off, and dirty jobs got me honest again, right? That's really where my education started. But years later, we locked down. And to your point, I was stunned when it happened. Like everybody else, we're just trying to get our head around it. And okay, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, got it. And I was asked by the network to participate in a public service announcement, and I did. I basically sat in front of a camera and I said, look, we're all in this together, right? So for 2 weeks, let's do this, let's do that, because actually the expression I said was, we're all in the same boat, which I thought was really clever because I was doing this PSA with crab boat fishermen from the show Deadliest Catch, right? So yeah, we're all in the same boat, we're gonna come together, blah, 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 2 weeks. Well, 2 weeks comes, 2 weeks goes, and the whole story. And at some point, to your point, I realized, we're not all in the same boat. We're all in the same storm. But your boat might be a hell of a lot different than mine, or his, or hers, or whatever, right? And this idea, somehow, for a while, that we were all in this together, it was sort of a merry, cheery, weird kind of silver lining. It brought people together. In my community, every evening at 8 o'clock, people would walk out on their balconies in their yard and they would howl. They would all howl together as a kind of expression of solidarity for the healthcare workers.
Right. I witnessed that as well. Yeah.
So there was this moment where I think people of goodwill on both sides of the divide were kind of galvanized in a moment of, okay, right? Obviously it didn't last. But while it was happening, again, to your point, we're figuring out Zoom, which is held together entirely by fiber optics and wires, which live in pipes, which are underground, which are maintained by people whose names you don't know, right? But who were out there working. At the same time, people were working to keep the lights on. And this whole army of essential work that got back in the headlines. That's why I rebooted Dirty Jobs. As soon as that 2-week period was up and I realized we weren't coming out of this, I called the network and got my old crew together and we started filming that show again because we had to. But there was a moment where I realized, yeah, I'm wrong. I got it wrong.
And I like mentioning when we discuss this issue that, the pandemic policies resulted in what many people describe as the largest upward transfer of wealth in history. So, there's that.
I mean, if we were divided before, we're certainly now entering into what feels like a dual economy, and I'm not sure exactly what's dividing the economy. Maybe it's politics, but yeah, that didn't help it. That was a lot of money going in one direction for a long time. Look, if I'm being honest, I prospered. I didn't prosper because I stayed home, but I was very fortunate, to have a crew that was willing to work with me.
And I'll be honest, Epoch Times grew during this time. People seeking honest information. It was very difficult to find it.
Yeah.
You started talking about manufacturing. We gave away, whether it's Canada, my home country, or the US, we gave away our manufacturing for all sorts of reasons, perhaps well-intentioned. Some of them were definitely not well-intentioned. The point is that we've turned into much more of a service economy. And my belief is that in order for these countries that have done this to have a future, they actually have to bring that back. Let's talk about that. How do you view, bringing back manufacturing in a serious way to America?
Well, I don't think there's a switch we can flip. I wish there was, but I think that bringing manufacturing back is going to require us to do half a dozen other things really well and all at the same time. We have to rethink education. We have to rethink the definition of a good job. We have to confront the stigmas and the stereotypes and the myths and the misperceptions that are keeping people from pursuing these careers that don't require a 4-year degree. All of that is part of it. We have to elevate the dignity of the job itself. I'm not talking about cello music and look for the union label and all that stuff. It's more than that. It's guidance counselors. It's parents. It's honest conversations around the kitchen table where, we talked about shop class gone from high school. Well, that just means a whole generation of kids didn't even get a look at what those kinds of jobs look like. What more persuasive way what more persuasive thing could you do to tell a kid that a job doesn't matter by just removing it from sight and not talking about it? Wood shop, metal shop, auto shop, all that stuff, right? We're still reeling from all that. It's not a coincidence in my mind that the push to offshore coincided with the death of shop class and the rise of the service economy and Walmart to some degree.
Do you remember, I just have to jump in, do you remember this? And I thought this was so insulting back in the day, but learn to code. You remember that?
Yeah, sure, I'll do that. I'll do that tonight. I'll learn to code. Look, it's all oversimplified, including the conversation we're having right now, honestly. We know in our gut that it doesn't make sense to depend on China so completely for our medical supplies. We know that, All I can think of is the frog in the boiling water. You know, it wasn't so bad when we hopped in, but the temperature went up a little bit more and a little bit more. And now we really have forgotten, it seems, how to make a great many things. And it's not just a matter of the economy. There's something else baked into this. It's our identity. It's feeling self-reliant. You know, we want to feel independent. We want to feel like, yes, we want to be partners in the global community, but we want to do it on our terms. We don't want to do it because we have to. We want to do it because it makes sense for us to do it. And that starts with being able to create whatever we need internally. Honestly, it starts with energy independence.
Okay, it's funny because that's exactly, either you read my mind or I sent it into your...
Well, I mean, look, we can talk about, all the things in this room that matter to us. The rug, the chairs we're sitting on, my smartphone over there, they all come from different parts of the globe. And we all need them to different degrees. But if you distill it down, like what really, really, really matters, this country is going to be fine unless gas goes to $15 a gallon, which it could. And if that happens, every single thing is going to change. The trucks aren't going to be able to run. The food's not going to be able to get on the shelf. So many things are going to be impacted by that. And it doesn't even have to be 15. It could be 10. It could be 10 in 6 months. Who knows what's going to happen? What I do know is that we're sitting on about 100 years of oil and natural gas. We're sitting on it. And we can have this whole conversation about alternatives. Fine. I want alternatives too. I don't want to get stuck in the present any more than I want to get stuck in the past. But who are we kidding? If we're going to import oil and gas at the same time we're sitting on it, that's not bad economics. That's a kind of hypocrisy that I don't know what to say about that, except shame on us, shame on us. So yeah, the energy conversation is a sticky wicket, but I don't think we can have it until we first acknowledge that there are 3 billion people on the planet right now who are relying on wood and dung as their primary sources of energy. And that's having a huge impact on the environment. And those people need to prosper, Jan, right? They need to be shown a way forward. They need their industrial revolution. So if we're going to tell them no coal, no oil, and no gas, what do we expect them to do?
Well, we're consigning them to, not developing, not flourishing. Basically, that's what you're saying.
I'm saying that, and at the same time, we're also pointing at the one thing that I know of, with the possible exception of cold fusion. We're pointing to nuclear, and we're going, oh, no, we don't do that. Like, we learned our lesson from 3 Mile Island. What? You know how many people died at 3 Mile Island? None. Fukushima. Yes, people died at Fukushima. Most of them drowned as a result of the tsunami. Chernobyl? I remember looking at a map of Europe. A quarter of it was just dark, gone. They said this is what could happen. All these people gone. A couple of dozen people died, I believe. Many fighting the fire after the reactor. My point is, we've got it in our head that nuclear is nothing but certain death.
And based on the numbers, it's by far the safest.
By far.
By far the safest form of energy. I want to touch a little bit on the supply chains. The energy independence discussion is very important to me, but you just made me think of something. It has to do with dirty jobs. That's why I think you'll appreciate this. I think my observation is a lot of you said there's this kind of hypocrisy, right? It's almost like we don't want to do some of the dirty jobs. Like, for example, some of the medical precursors, which I think you were pointing out examples of dependency on China in the supply chains. Medical precursors are a big problem, right? Some of those medical precursors, the way you make them is very dirty. And, it's much easier and cheaper to make them in a place where, well, let's just say regulation either doesn't exist or could be gotten rid of with a few dollars in the right pockets, rather than here where you actually have to do it in a cleaner way, right? So I think this is a reality we also have to confront.
It's a bargain, it's a deal that we make. And I don't know, honestly, I'm not sure it's a great deal. In general, it's sort of like we put our gifted and talented kid into a really troubled school in the inner city and said, at least everybody's all together, right? Now we're in the global economy. We're dependent on all sorts of other things. We're no longer relying on ourselves. And what's happening to our kid? This metaphorical kid in my mind is our manufacturing base. It's our national identity. We want to be out. We've decided that we want to be an active participant in the global economy. And we did it, I think, in a really general way, because there are more people in this country who are consumers than workers. Everybody's a consumer. Half the country is working. So we ultimately put our thumb on the scale in a way that gives us low prices every day. The lowest possible price. The lowest possible. What would that iPad cost even if we had the ability to make it here in its entirety? What would it cost? If you factor in all of the pensions, if you factor in all of the union stipulations, everything else,
More.
You'd still have it, but you'd pay more. So look, we all have skin in this game. And it's not just our elected officials. It's how much do you want to pay for your sweatshirt, your socks, this rug, this chair, that iPad? That's the question that's been put to all of us. And I've been down this road a bunch. I worked years ago with a jean manufacturing company. And they didn't make their jeans here. It was a big national brand, one of the biggest. And I said, can't we just do one little vertical of purely American made, right? Just so we could just put it out there and say, we're trying. And I said, well, we have tried. And I said, what happened? And they showed me the research, and it's hard to believe. But what happened was, if you put this pair of jeans on a shelf next to a pair of jeans that's 100% made in the USA, and you charge $2 more for the exact same pair made here, you'll sell zero. If you charge $1 more, you'll sell zero. If you charge 50 cents more, you'll sell zero. This big giant textile manufacturer, one of the biggest in the country, showed me the data. It went all the way down to a penny. If you charge 1 penny more, that's when they started to see some people buying the US version. Only when it was dead equal did you see people
Choosing the American product.
correct
Fascinating.
and apocryphal and
Right.
powerful.
Right.
Because for all our pontificating and proselytizing and, oh yeah, we got to make it here. Why can't we make it here? Back to Walmart. Why do you think they're Walmart? A, they're everywhere. They're in the small towns and they're big and it's low prices every day. So we can hate them and we can look at them and we can shake our heads at them, but we are them. We are all consumers.
Right.
And whether we abdicated consciously or subconsciously, we sat back and we gave it all away. We put it all out there. And now we're dependent and we don't want to do the dirty jobs, to your point. We don't want that part of the supply chain. We don't want to see it. So we're going to have to rethink some things.
And maybe we've lost a bit of, I guess, the faith in ourselves as Americans. As a Canadian, if I can say that, because I certainly feel very American, even though I am technically not.
Well, think
Yeah.
about it. I mean, never mind the border, never mind your nationality. How do you, when you feel competent, when you feel like you can fix the busted toilet or correct the electricity problem, if you feel like you can fix your own garage door, right? That's a different kind of existence than knowing I got a guy for that and he's in this phone that I don't even know how to barely operate. You know, if you're reliant in 1,000 little micro ways, then of course you're going to be reliant in just as many macro ways. We expect the food to be on the shelf. We expect the light to come on when we flip that switch. We expect the mess to go away when we flush the toilet. And when it doesn't happen, then we're kind of laid bare. We have no choice but to come face to face with the depth of our own incompetence. And that makes us crazy because nobody wants to feel that way. So we start resenting the very people who we should be celebrating. I saw this just a few miles from here where I live. We lost power a couple years ago for 5 days. 3 days in, people were like shaking their fists at the linemen who are working on the power lines, trying to get the power back on. They're so freaked out and frustrated that they take it out on the worker. Think about it. You've done it. You've been in traffic. You're late. There's road construction. How can there be road construction? Don't they know I'm a very important person and I have to be somewhere? And now they're working on the road at 2 p.m. And you look at these guys and you shake your head and it all gets filed under some sort of inconvenience. We can't help it. It's the fault in our stars. We don't look at the cause of our delay and go, man, those guys are busting their butt. I'm so glad they're out there working with the asphalt in the heat. I'm so glad. We are as disconnected as you alluded to before about all of it.
But haven't we, alongside this change in education that we've been discussing in different ways the whole time, basically, we've been chatting here, there's been this, in some cases, very overt, sort of disdain for, the American spirit, where it came from.
Yeah.
The founding fathers, civics as a whole.
It's of a piece, Jan. I think there's a force that pushes us to resent that upon which we rely. Instead of gratitude, we have resentment. Instead of curiosity for what the founding fathers did, risked, and sacrificed, we're angry with them because they didn't comport with our current belief and understanding of what a virtuous person would do, what an enlightened person would do, or I guess an awakened person today. So we're cherry picking the past. I think in many cases we're being motivated by a guilty conscience, which is brought on by the uncomfortable realization that we operate a great many machines and servo mechanisms that we don't ourselves understand. We know it. We know we've slowly arbitraged our own involvement out of the daily routines of polite society. And we know it, I believe. We know we're becoming increasingly dependent on something that isn't us, not the individual. We're relying more and more on things beyond our own control. And we're doing it in our own zip codes, in our own states. We're doing it in our country. We're doing it around the world. We're doing it in 1,000 ways and 1,000,000 decisions. We're abdicating more and more, and the heat is going up a little higher, and the water's bubbling, and the frog is us, and we're still in there.
And that's an incredibly interesting view, I have to say. I hadn't thought about it that way.
Well, that's why I'm a thought leader, Jan. See, that's why I've been invited on this program. I guess.
Well, so as we finish up, let's talk a bit about the work that you are doing at MicroWorks, which I think is, kind of trying to push back against this reality that you just described. And again, I'm gonna really think about this, because I think there's something to it. Just had never thought about it that way. But please, tell me more about what you're doing and how you're I guess turning the tide a bit here, right?
I hope so. But look, I'm trying to be super mindful. Humility played a big role in the success of Dirty Jobs, and I didn't have it when I started. I got it along the way, and the temptation to get bigger all the time. Macro versus micro. I'm micro, right? I've learned that there's real happiness and real pride and real accomplishment in helping one person learn a skill that's in demand and get out into the world and work. I am surrounded by people, well-intended people, who believe that the more of that I can do, the happier I'll be, and the more successful the foundation will become. If one is good, well, two'd be double good, right? Four would be 8, and so forth. Okay, so we're up to like 1,800 people, and we've given away $7 or $8 million. And that's still very, very modest by foundation standards. But the pressure to do more is fascinating to me. And I guess I will. I guess it's better to help more, but what I'd leave you with is the real goal of the foundation is not to impact as many people as possible with money so they can be trained, so they can go work and live a productive life. That's not actually our big goal. The big goal is to use their stories, to get them out into the world, to share their stories with me or with you, right? Because I'm only as persuasive as a 60-year-old white dude can be who prospered in his chosen field. Some people will listen to me, most won't. But they'll listen to the 25-year-old Mexican kid who's making $140,000 a year in his chosen trade. They'll listen to the 27-year-old female welder who's making the same. People that affirmatively challenge their own expectations, right? So my job is to tell the stories of the people who applied for and received a work ethic scholarship, because those stories, with the help of that device, will reach guidance counselors, many of whom are currently being compensated based on the number of kids they get into a 4-year institution. That's happening. It's happening all over the place. That shouldn't be happening. So, in a good-natured way, without a lecture or a sermon or any finger wagging, I would like for the foundation to continue to give me the opportunity to talk to people like you about challenging some of these stigmas and stereotypes that are still in the way. You know, I know lots of proud people doing lots of jobs that don't seem to have a lot of outward dignity, and vice versa. I know people who are bitter and broken and feel sort of empty, and they're movie stars. So, you know, success, it doesn't look like this thing we've been led to believe. It looks like something else. And one version of that is a skilled trade.
Well, Mike Rowe, it's such a pleasure to have had you on.
Thanks for having me here, wherever I am. It's beautiful.
Thank you all for joining Mike Rowe and me on this episode of American Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Yanya Kellick.
Time and time again, after talking with septic tank workers and bridge builders and skull cleaners and just this endless variety